Good to see you all here in the sanctuary this morning. And as always, we like to welcome those folks out there in that place we call virtual world. We're glad you're all with us today, however you choose to join us. So did everybody have a good 4th? Safe 4th? Yes, enjoy all the heat and humidity. Yeah. Kind of made my hair curl. Yeah. Yeah, some of you got that. Good, good, good. All right, let's get started today. I'm starting today with a reminder of what the unity movement is at its core. It's what you might call that elevator speech, that speech you give people when they say, okay, you say you're with unity, but just what is unity? So, from Unity Worldwide Ministries, unity is a positive, practical, progressive approach to Christianity based on the teachings of Jesus and the power of prayer. We honor the universal truths in all religions, and we respect each individual's right to choose a spiritual path. And that's important because this month I'm focusing on the unity honors the universal truths in all religions portion of that particular statement. And I would add not only all religions, but all spiritual philosophies as well. And I say philosophies because, there is this philosophy out there called the perennial philosophy, which in a nutshell just teaches that there is a recurrence of some common themes across world religions. And these themes have something to tell us about the universal truths involving life and the nature of reality, humanity, ethics, and consciousness. So again, perennial philosophy says that there are some common recurring themes across all world religions to teach us about ethics, the nature of reality, life, human consciousness, ethics, and so on. And if you're a little bit confused about that, here's a quick example. The Golden Rule. We remember the Golden Rule, don't we? Our master teacher, Jesus, is quoted as saying, "In everything, do to others what you would have them do to you." Or we may have heard it as "do unto others as you would have them do unto you." And since unity is based, at least in part, on the teachings of Jesus, that's something we should all be paying attention to, right? All right. But other religions have their version of the Golden Rule as well. For example, from Judaism, what you find hateful, don't do to your brother. Buddhism, whatever is disagreeable to yourself, do not do unto others. Confucianism, do not do to others what you do not want them to do to you. Islam, do unto all men as you would wish to have done unto you, and reject for others that which you reject for yourself. Taoism, regard your neighbor's gain as your own gain and your neighbor's loss as your own loss. So as we can see, there are many versions of this truth across world religions. That's the perennial philosophy or the golden thread at work. With that in mind, this month we're going to take another look at the perennial philosophy at work as we take a deep dive into something called the Yamas, Niyamas, and we're going to compare those with the 10 Commandments from the Bible. Why this topic? And why now? You might be thinking. Well, if you look around, folks, there is a lot going on in the world, isn't there? Right? And our Unity 5th principle teaches us what? It's not enough to know spiritual truth. We must engage. We must use those spiritual truths to help us respond to others because, I don't know about you, but sometimes it feels like what my Mama Carrie used to say. She'd look out and she'd watch the news or something. She'd say, there are people out there acting like they ain't got no mamas. Yeah. So there's a lot going on, right? Locally, globally, nationally. So I think it's a good time for us to take a look at some of these ethical guidelines. Here we go. I'm starting with the elephant in the room question. Just what the heck are yamas and niyamas? Yamas and niyamas are simply ethical guidelines, and they are found in the yoga philosophy. It's the first two limbs. They are the first two limbs of what is called the Eightfold Path of Yoga. Deborah Adele, who's the author of our series book, The Yamas and Niyamas, Exploring Yoga's Ethical Principles or Practices, calls them jewels. And she does that because for her, the yamas and niyamas are rare gems of wisdom, and they give direction to a life that is more joyful and well-lived. Joyful, well-lived life. Now, who doesn't want that, right? Who doesn't want that? And the great news here, folks, is you don't have to learn Sanskrit, which is the original language they were written in. You don't have to learn Sanskrit. You don't have to buy yoga pants and twist yourself into a pretzel in order to practice namas and yamas. You're welcome. Now, there are 5 yamas, which are called restraints, and there are 5 niyamas, which are called observances. Put them together, you have 10 guidelines for ethical living. And just what are the 10 commandments in the Bible? 10 guidelines for ethical living. And to be fair, now these yamas, niyamas, and the commandments don't always line up. They don't always line up word for word. Yet there are several points of agreement. And what I like about the yamas and niyamas are, if we read them and examine that, they really challenge us to examine our ethics, our words, and our behaviors in ways that the commandments often don't. So I'm starting with the yamas, or restraints. Now, when you think about yamas, you can kind of think of them as corresponding to all those thou shalt nots in the commandments. They're not stated that way, but they sort of compare that way. The first and foundational yama is nonviolence, or ahimsa. And I'm going to spend a whole lot of time on nonviolence. What? Who knows the corresponding commandment to nonviolence? That's right. Thou shalt not kill. Excellent. Now, when we hear the word nonviolence or the commandment, thou shalt not kill, what do we think about? We think about physical violence first, right? And that makes sense. I think we all agree that not killing each other is a pretty good idea. But look around. Look around. You know, and I'm not just talking about the atrocities of war either. We've seen road rage stories, not only nationally, but also locally. We've all seen stories of violent protest. We've seen stories of insurrection, even here in the United States. It's not just overseas where all this goes on, folks. We have heard, maybe some of us have experienced, and we have seen stories of domestic violence as well. So what creates all this violence? I believe it is actually unhealthy forms of fear. Think about this. Almost all world religions teach that nothing is permanent, right? Everything changes, and we get that, and we say we get that, and we're on board with that until change happens to us. And then things tend to change. Lives shift. Things happen. Life changes. Something that we always counted on is no longer with us, and we get a little bit afraid. Some people get a whole lot afraid. And they let that fear take over, and they become fearful that there isn't going to be enough to go around. People become fearful of the other, whatever the other for them happens to be. And when that gets to a certain point, some people start reinterpreting the golden rule. That is, they choose to interpret the golden rule as do unto others before they do unto me. Just in case, you know, because you can't trust those other people. You know how they are. So, physical violence is definitely part of this discussion, yet the Yama of nonviolence, or ahimsa, actually takes this further. From our series book, nonviolence is defined as a stance of right relationship with others and with ourself. It is neither self-sacrifice nor self-promotion. I would say unhealthy self-promotion. The tenet guides us to live together, share the goods, and do what we want without causing harm to others or ourselves. Now that's really important because we talk a lot about freedom this week, right? July the 4th. Do what we want. No, do what we want without causing harm to others and ourselves. The point that this Yama is making is there is more to violence than just physical violence. Consider this. When we're feeling afraid, when we're feeling out of alignment, powerless, when life just comes at us too fast sometimes and we can't handle it or feel like we can't, what do we do sometimes? We snap, right? We snap at loved ones. We snap at coworkers. We snap at the person who cut us off in traffic. Some of us even yell at the television. We tend to beat ourselves up pretty well too, don't we? Let's not forget too, folks, words. Words have power. We have all seen what happens when people in power get up and encourage others to commit violent acts across the globe. Somebody eventually is going to listen to you and take you at your word. It happens. So where does all that come from? In here. Because remember, nobody can make us feel any way. Nobody can make us do anything. It comes from us. So it follows that the more nonviolent we can learn to be within ourselves, that translates to being possibly more nonviolent toward others. Remember Eric Butterworth, life is lived from inside out. And we can develop that skill of inner nonviolence by recognizing and addressing those things we call triggers, those things which we allow to set us off. And I want to make this clear. There's a big difference in recognizing our triggers, saying that we know something, we allow this particular thing or this particular person or whether to set us off. It's great that we recognize it. It's a whole other thing to do something about it. It's both and. We recognize it, we address it. So how do you do that? Well, one way we can address our trigger requires first developing the courage to face the fears that bring those triggers about. Courage does not mean, however, that we aren't afraid to face our fears, right? It just means we don't let that fear or that doubt or that hesitancy to actually paralyze us from doing what is ours to do. And this is very, very important that we do this within ourselves. Why? Because Deborah Adele tells us that when we are unwilling to look deeply and courageously into our own lives, we can easily do violence to others without knowing it. And we do it thinking we're actually helping them out. What does that look like? Well, it is so much easier for me to look at Scott and help him with his stuff and get his life in order than it is for me to look at my own stuff. and get my own life in order, right? And we all got stuff, folks. I know I've got stuff. I don't like looking at my stuff. I don't think any of us like looking at our stuff. So we say, okay, I'm going to help somebody else with theirs. Gives us something to do, right? So how do we do violence to others in that respect? A couple of quick examples here. Thinking that we know what's best for others and then worrying about them all the time. And that's hard, isn't it? That's hard to avoid, especially if you're a parent or a grandparent or it's people that you love and care so much about. We worry. And especially as we get older, we know better, right? Because older necessarily means wiser, right? We are just so smart. Wouldn't life work out so much better if our kids and our grandkids and people just listened to us and did what we told them? Absolutely. Yet consider this too. When we are constantly worrying and trying to manage everything and everyone, what we're actually saying is we don't trust. We don't trust others. We don't trust ourselves. We don't even trust spirit. We don't even trust God. Nonviolence, however, asks us to do just the opposite. It asks us to trust. It asks us to trust the journey of others as well as our own journey. It encourages us to love and support others and ourselves to live from our best and highest selves. That is, nonviolence asks us to stop trying to manage everything and everyone, as if we could do that anyway. Allow others to be free of our needs and expectations, and allow ourselves to be free of the expectations and the opinions of others. Next, doing our best to live in balance also helps us address our triggers. And that's challenging too, because you know what? Life's just really busy sometimes, isn't it? Sometimes it's way too busy. But staying healthy, doing our best to balance our physical, emotional, and spiritual health is necessary, because that helps us recognize when a trigger shows up. If we are all frazzled and not taking care of ourselves, we don't recognize the trigger, it hits us from the side, and then we blow up in one way or another. It's important to take care of ourselves. Our author, Deborah Adele, says that when we are able to live in balance, we are actually living in non-violence. And here's one that you knew was coming. And it's not, well, it's in the book. Love. Love of God, love of neighbor, love of self. Just like our master teacher Jesus said. He said it was the greatest of all the commandments. Bigger than the Big Ten, more than the Yamas and Niyamas. Love. And I want to be very clear here. When I say love, I mean a strong love. A love that is willing to say both yes and no. Because given the circumstance, either one can be a complete sentence and an appropriate answer. This is a love that knows how to draw healthy boundaries. This is a welcoming kind of love. It is not, however, a doormat kind of love. Big difference, okay? Love does not mean accepting abuse in any way, shape, or form. It's a love that is willing to keep an open mind while also speaking its own truth. And that's something we're going to look at a lot more depth next week. At the end of the day, folks, practicing nonviolence, as I've just described it, real nonviolence, involves far more than not killing one another, as important as that is. Practicing true nonviolence isn't always easy either. We will drop the ball. Chances are we'll drop the ball a lot. The most important thing to remember, though, is when you drop the ball, pick it back up. After all, nonviolence, just like all the Yamas and Niyamas, is a practice. And the point is, keep practicing. In closing today, I think Ernest Holmes probably made one of the strongest arguments for nonviolence when he said, "We are one, even while we are many. And since each one of us is a part of the whole, if we seek to destroy each other, we only ultimately hurt ourselves. Freedom, then, will come only in such degree as we no longer hurt one another. That is the great lesson of life. If we seek to destroy one another, we ultimately hurt ourselves. Freedom, then, will come only in such degree as we no longer harm one another. That is the great lesson of life." So the question I'm closing with and asking us today is, are we learning the lesson? Are we willing to learn the lesson? And so it is.